And that's when I understood. The field had taken my heartbeat first. I could feel the absence where it should have been. That empty chamber behind my ribs, just hollow. And then my breathing went. No panic, mind you. Can't panic when the panic itself is being harvested out of you. I stood there in what used to be corn, only it was bone. All bone and teeth clicking in the breeze, and I could hear the thresher coming through the rows. Not a sound exactly, a thrumming, a pulling. And I realized then, that everything I'd come down into that valley to find, every answer about what happened to that land, every terrible secret the mountains had buried, it had been waiting for someone to walk into the quiet. And now the quiet was walking into me. My name is Harold Crane. I spent 56 years surveying the mountains, reading the land, mapping watersheds. In June of 1948, I was working near the Little Tennessee River in Loudoun County, Tennessee. What I didn't have was any map that included the valley I found. The topography of that region was mapped down to every creek, except for one place. Right there in the middle, the paper stopped making sense. A blank spot, like someone had cut it away with a razor blade. Not cleanly. The edges were still there, but that valley, it was like someone erased it so carefully that they left the space where it used to be. I found it by accident, getting turned around, coming out of dense hemlocks. The sun was high, the way it gets in June, and I stepped out onto a sudden flatness. The mountains just stopped. The air changed. The temperature dropped 20 degrees. My breath fogged in the June heat. The light had a quality I'd never seen, like it came through very old glass, distorted, thin. Before me was a valley filled with corn. But this corn was bone white, utterly drained of color. The stalks looked brittle. The wind went still when it touched them. I took compass readings. The field was approximately 320 yards long, 150 wide. The stalks were uniform, standing in perfect rows, geometric precision. But there was no farmhouse, no signs of habitation at all. The smell was mineral, like old stone, old bone, old copper. Then I pulled up one of the stalks. That was my mistake. It didn't budge. I pulled harder, and I heard something crack. Not a plant breaking, like breaking glass, complex, layered. like 100 pieces breaking all at once through the entire field. Every plant made that sound, a synchronized cracking, like the whole thing was one organism and I'd heard it. The sound lasted 3 seconds, long enough for my nervous system to move my legs. I stepped back, hand tingling. Nothing happened. The stalks stood in their rows. The light remained strange. The silence came back, heavier, more deliberate. I told myself it was a trick of the ears, wind carrying sound in particular ways. And then I walked into it anyway. The moment my first boot touched the earth between the rows, the temperature dropped another 10 degrees. I could see my breath in front of me, the small clouds dissipating into that thin, strange light. The silence deepened. I don't know how else to describe it. It wasn't just the absence of sound. It was like the air itself had weight, and all that weight was pressing down on any sound that tried to exist. The stalks were close on either side of me. I'm 6 feet tall, and my head came up to about the middle of them. They were smooth, those stalks, not rough like corn usually is. Smooth like bone, actually, like the femur of some enormous animal. And they were cold. I brushed against one as I moved down the row, and the cold of it transferred through my shirt sleeve. Real cold. The kind that makes you understand that things have been this way for a very long time. I kept my eyes forward and walked maybe 30 feet into the field. The rows seemed to go on forever in front of me, disappearing into the strange light. The edges of the field, where I'd entered from the tree line, were already difficult to see behind me. The corn seemed to be swallowing distance. The further I went, the further everything was. And then I heard it, the sound underneath the silence, a thrumming, a rhythmic thrumming like something mechanical, but far below the field, in the ground, like the earth itself was vibrating at a frequency just below what you could hear clearly. You felt it more than heard it. It set your teeth on edge, made your fillings ache if you had them. I have 2 old fillings in my left molar, and I could taste the metal. Copper. Blood copper. I stopped walking. I looked down at the stalk nearest to me, really looked at it for the first time. And that was when I understood what I was standing in. They weren't stalks at all. They were bones, finger bones, tibia, fibula, the small, delicate bones of a hand, arranged in a stalk configuration, all of them fitted together with something that looked like calcium deposits binding them at the joints. And the leaves were teeth, molars, bicuspids, incisors, all of them arranged in a leaf-like pattern, all of them pointing inward, all of them facing down the rows of the field. I made a sound then, some kind of involuntary noise that my throat produced without my permission. It was too loud in that place. It echoed wrong, and it made the thrumming stop. The moment the sound cut off, I felt it. That's the only way I can describe it. A feeling, a pulling sensation, not physical, but not entirely mental either. Like something was trying to draw me deeper into the rows. Like the field itself had noticed I was there and was reaching for me. The pulling wasn't strong. It was almost gentle, but it was insistent. It wanted me to keep walking. It wanted me to go deeper. I turned around. I didn't run. I've never been a running man, even when I was young. But I walked fast as I could move while still keeping my bearing straight back the way I'd come. The rows all looked the same. Every row was identical to every other row. The perspective tricks your eyes play on you in a field like that. Everything uniform and receding. It's the same thing you see in wheat fields or corn fields anywhere. But here there was something deliberate about it. It was a maze constructed by intelligence. But I'm a surveyor. I know how to read a landscape. I kept my pace steady and my compass bearing true. And after what felt like an hour, but was probably 2 minutes, I saw the tree line ahead, the dark shapes of the hemlocks, the boundary where white corn ended and the world started again. I burst out of that field with my heart hammering, and I didn't stop walking until I'd made it back through the trees to the part of the landscape that appeared on my maps. I sat down on a boulder for a good long while, just breathing, just reminding my nervous system that I was still attached to my body, and my body was still attached to the world I knew. When I finally stood up, the sun was lower in the sky. The day had gone somewhere while I was in that place. The light that came through the trees had that late afternoon quality to it. Longer shadows, more amber, normal, real. But I could still hear it, the thrumming. It was quieter now, more distant, but it was still there, just below the threshold of normal hearing, a vibration in the air, a pulling from the direction I'd just come. I should have left, but I was a surveyor, and there was a land formation that didn't appear on any map. That was a problem I had to solve. I was also afraid. There was something about that place that felt incomplete, like a question that would follow me. When the sun came up the next morning, I made my way back to the valley's edge. In the daylight, it was worse. That thin light made the white corn glow like it was generating its own illumination. I kept walking. The rows seemed shorter this time, or I was moving faster, or time was moving differently. The thrumming started almost immediately, like the field had been waiting for my return. I kept walking. The temperature dropped as I moved deeper. I could see my breath in that thin light, and then I felt it. That pulling sensation, but stronger, more direct. It wasn't pulling me forward anymore. It was pulling something from inside me. My heartbeat first. I became aware of it because it stopped. Not in a frightening way, just an absence. I was walking through a field of bones, and suddenly there was no heartbeat in my chest. It was like a sound I'd been hearing my whole life, so constant I never noticed it. And now it was gone. I could feel that absence like a hole. I tried to turn back, but the rows had rearranged themselves. All the same. The light was all the same. The stalks, the bones, pressed closer. These were human bones. Finger bones arranged like fingers, but too many of them. And the teeth, human teeth, arranged with sharp edges facing inward. My breathing left me next. Not suddenly. My lungs still moved, but the air wasn't going in or out. No exchange. No intake. Just the sound of breathing without the substance of it. That's when I understood. The field was harvesting me. Not my body. My internal sounds. The sounds that make you, you. The rhythms that keep you tethered to the world you know. My heartbeat had been first, my breathing second. I could feel other things lining up. The sound of blood moving through my veins, the electrical signals in my brain. Everything was waiting in line. And the field was patient. I ran then. I didn't care about direction. I just moved, and the stalks tore at my face and my hands, and the bones rattled and clicked together, and I could hear the thrumming getting closer, like the whole earth was vibrating at a frequency that was pulling everything out of me that made a sound. The tree line appeared. I stumbled out of that field, and the moment I touched the earth outside it, the pulling stopped. My heartbeat came back, racing in my chest like a trapped bird, and then it settled, and my breath came back with a gasp that felt like drowning in reverse. I collapsed on the ground. I lay there for a long time, just breathing, just existing. When I finally stood up, the sun was setting. The day had been taken from me, hours of it gone. The field was smaller, or further away, or both. It was fading into the distance, and I was afraid that if I didn't leave right now, it would fade completely, and I would remain in this place forever. I walked to my truck. I drove away. I didn't look back until I'd crossed the Little Tennessee River and come out the other side on a road that was mapped and real and made sense. I filed no official report about the Dead Zone Valley. The maps and sketches I made, I destroyed all of it, burned it in my fireplace. I told the Tennessee Department that the survey was impossible due to magnetic anomalies, which was technically true. I never went back. Some questions aren't meant to be answered. Some doors are better left closed. But I followed the news from that region for decades. I watched for missing persons in Loudoun County. I found nothing, which was almost worse than finding something, because nothing meant that place was still there, still waiting, still growing. You have to understand, places like that don't come into existence by accident. Something had to feed them. Someone had to tend them. But no one was disappearing. That meant people had to find that valley first. You had to step through the tree line at exactly the right spot. You had to find the blind space on the map. You had to be lost before you could be found. I'm old now, 83. My hands shake. My memory loses pieces every day. But I remember that field with perfect clarity. The bone-white stalks, the teeth leaves, the thrumming sound that came from the earth itself, what it felt like to be unmade, piece by piece, sound by sound. And I remember the thing I didn't tell anyone. 3 months ago, I found a map from 1921 in an estate sale. There it was, the valley, not a blank space, actually marked on the map. Someone else had found it. Someone else had survived. And the name written on the map, in careful handwriting at the center of the field, was The Thresher's Garden. The handwriting looked familiar. I stared at it, and then I looked at the date, and I understood. The map was made by Randolph Crane, my great-uncle who went surveying in East Tennessee in 1921 and never came back out. I've been sitting with it ever since, wondering how something that doesn't exist on any other map, something that's been deliberately erased from every official document, something that made those white stalks from something's bones. I wonder how it's gotten so good at calling people back. And if you're still awake somewhere in the mountains tonight, if you work with maps and you've ever found a blank space where something should be, Be careful where you step to fill it in. The fields are still growing. The thresher is still hungry. And it's still very, very patient. The mountains have more to tell you if you're foolish enough to listen. You know what's strange? Every time someone shares a story, really shares it, not just likes it, I get a message. Different accounts, different people, but the same message, almost word for word. My grandfather was a surveyor. He went into the mountains in 1947. We never talk about what happened. That's happened, I've lost count how many times. So here's what I'm asking. If you have that story, if someone in your family won't talk about the maps they made, won't go back to certain places, won't explain the blank spaces in their old surveys, comment. Just say, my family knows. That's all. Just so we know we're not alone. Follow the archives, because these stories are getting organized. They're being mapped. And every person who comments, every person who follows, is part of that map. And share this. Send it to your cousin who studies geography, your friend who collects old county maps, your mother who keeps asking why grandfather's notebook is blank after page 47. Because I think, and this is just a theory, but I think the more people know about places like Thresher's Garden, the safer those places become. Or maybe the more dangerous. I'm not entirely sure anymore. But I am sure that you need to hear what others have found. Comment, follow, share.